My presentation is on the Coca-Cola company. I've been a long time drinker of Coca-Cola products. I used to drink a regular Coke every day. I've switched to Diet Coke, and honestly, I've drank less soda lately, but I still really enjoy it. I wanted to learn more about it. I might drink less soda now that I've learned more about it. The quote on my title slide, "I want to see a lot of body bags," comes from one of the Coca-Cola executives, and I will get into what that means in a bit. First, let's talk about the ingredients in a standard can of regular Coca-Cola. First, carbonated water. This is the majority of any soft drink. It's what makes it bubbly. Next, high fructose corn syrup, which, as this cartoon says, is in pretty much everything. It's just used for a sweetener. The next ingredient is actually listed as the caramel coloring. The only thing listed about it that I found interesting, though, was also a little terrifying. A known chemical called formol, and it is carcinogenic, which means it causes cancer in excessive levels. For the most part, as you can see on this graph from Consumer Reports, Coke, Coke Zero, Diet Coke, they don't really have the unsafe levels of it, like an individual serving. But in random testing, Pepsi products were found to have pretty unsafe levels of that. And that's in like one serving of it. So if you drink a lot of Coca-Cola products, you are getting, more and more exposures to that problematic, shall we say, ingredient. And that is it, again, in the caramel coloring. The next ingredient listed is phosphoric acid. So it has two functions. It gives Coke that crisp bite in the flavor, but it's also a preservative. It kind of keeps mold from growing in the can. And interestingly, it's really bad for your tooth enamel. And you would think that dark sodas would be worse for your teeth than clear sodas like Sprite, but it's actually the other way around because Sprite and other clear sodas contain more phosphoric acid, and that is more corrosive to your teeth. The next ingredient I have represented with a question mark, which is just natural flavors. And it's a question mark because the FDA's description of what can count as natural flavors is so incredibly broad. It can be basically anything. So we don't know. That's that secret formula stuff, I guess. The last ingredient listed is caffeine. This chart comes from one of the previous iterations of the Coca-Cola website. They're pretty proud that a Coca-Cola product has less caffeine than different types of coffee, certainly less caffeine than an energy drink, even a cup of tea or a chocolate bar. So they're trying to position themselves as an alternative to more heavily caffeinated drinks. The next slide focuses on the nutrition of Coca-Cola. And I mean, it's not nutritious. You probably knew that before this presentation started. It's just junk food. We all partake in those things, but we're supposed to partake in them sparingly. We all know that at this point. But I like this image from sugarstacks.com, which is a website where they literally just stack up the teaspoons of sugar in your favorite drinks and foods, so you can kind of visually see how much sugar is in them. And you can see from this that there's a lot of sugar in Coca-Cola products. So the standard can on the left has 10 teaspoons of sugar. And for reference, the American Heart Association suggests adults should only have 9 teaspoons, or about 36 grams, of sugar in their diet a day. And that's, again, for adults, and a can of Coke has more than that, 10. So one serving of Coke and you're already exceeding the amount of sugar you probably should have in a day. So watch out for that if you drink any soda, that the sugar is a pretty common ingredient. Let's get into the history of the company, because they're a really, really old company, at least by convenience food standards. It goes back to 1885, actually, is when the recipe was created by a Confederate general by the name of, or former Confederate general by the name of John Pemberton. He created a nerve tonic to ease him off of morphine, and they've changed the ingredients up a little bit since that time. The company has changed hands throughout the years, but what made his nerve tonic into the mega billion brand it is today started with their invention of the speed bottling machinery, equipment, process, and it allowed their drink to be served in individual ready-made servings. So instead of having to go to the soda fountain for a Coca-Cola, which of course we still have fountain drinks now, you could put them in vending machines, which were really new, but Coca-Cola's presence in bottles have really revolutionized vending machines too. So it just allowed them to be everywhere, not just at a soda fountain, and that's what made them super popular. So, despite all these changes, one thing you'll notice consistently, even as it goes from glass bottles to plastic bottles, is that the brand logo has stayed exactly the same. That original Coca-Cola font looks pretty much exactly as it does now. The red and white color scheme they've used for decades, that hasn't changed. It's very recognizable because it's very consistent. If you look at how, for example, Pepsi has changed through the years, they're always trying to reinvent themselves, but Coke stays the same. So, Coca-Cola now has over 500 different products around the globe. This is just a small fraction of them in this bottom picture here. Some you might recognize, some you might not because they're from different countries. And according to the Coca-Cola website, today, like every individual day, 1.9 billion Coca-Cola product servings are sold in over 200 countries around the world. And accordingly, the brand today is worth more than Starbucks, Pepsi, Red Bull, and Budweiser combined at more than $74 billion. So it's clearly the leader in drinks around the world. So how do they do that? It's the marketing. Their marketing budgets lately are more than Apple and Microsoft's combined. And they got an early start in some really, really successful marketing campaigns. They're pretty clever in what they've done through the years. So let's go back to World War II, where U.S. servicemen were stationed, all over the world, far away from home, and Coca-Cola, wanted to offer service to them, also gain a little notoriety for themselves, I think, and they made a Coca-Cola available to every U.S. serviceman anywhere in the world for 5 cents each. So, certainly made it more affordable and accessible, a little reminder of home for people in far-flung reaches around the globe. But it also meant that they stayed pretty loyal to Coke when they came home. They were used to it. They enjoyed it. And that really gave them a boost in popularity after the war. They've also had a long time Christmas campaign. Coca-Cola wants to be associated with Christmas and all the good feelings and childhood joy that comes along with that. And as a result, they started creating these early images of Santa Claus that are kind of like what we think of when we think of Santa in American culture today. That actually comes from Coca-Cola advertising. And in more recent decades, in like the 90s and 2000s, they started adding the polar bears into their branding and commercials. And then now we associate them with, Coca-Cola as well. Not as much lately, but they will still come up in some of their advertising campaigns. But the main advertising campaign Coca-Cola has been going for is just making you think of them in the same thoughts as your happy memories. And I know that sounds really crazy and manipulative, but it works pretty well for them. Their slogan a while back was just simply open happiness. But if you think about it, Coca-Cola tries to be present anywhere where families and children are making happy memories. When you're playing t-ball at the ballpark, there's probably Coca-Cola in the concession stand. When you've gone to see, your favorite Marvel movie, you probably were drinking a Coke while you were watching, Spider-Man with your dad. They want to be present at amusement parks where you make great memories in the summer and things like that. So they try to get themselves anywhere where families are making good memories. The packaging for Coca-Cola really reinforces their brand identity. So let's start off with just the basic 12-ounce can of Coke. It's pretty simple. It's just the red and white colors, the traditional logo and big letters, and just the word classic. And that in and of itself reinforces their brand stability. The fact that it doesn't change makes it comfortable, recognizable, and that word classic does two things. First, it distinguishes them from New Coke, which was like a failed experiment a few decades ago where they changed the formula for a while, but they changed it back and then they called it Coke Classic ever since. But also that word classic carries an emotional value, it carries an ethos of something that's known and trusted. But you don't really buy them in just the cans, you buy a 12-pack or a 24-pack of the cans, or a set of bottles. So one interesting thing, you guys might be too young to remember, before 12 packs of soda came in this like rectangular box called the fridge pack, they were sold in, it was more common to sell them in a really very different shape for 12 packs. Ask your parents. But the fridge pack, which has this like tab that you open and the can just kind of like roll out to the front to make it easier to grab out of the fridge, was developed by Coca-Cola and basically was to allow you to stack more soda in your fridge. So you had more room for more Coke products. This particular package as well has an Olympics tie-in branding on it. And Coca-Cola, of course, is like a big global player, wants to be connected with the Olympics and the thrill of victory and well-known athletes. And, you know, it has presence all over the world, and the Olympics ties into that. And another really popular marketing campaign they had in recent decades was the Share a Coke With campaign. So there are 20-ounce bottles that you buy in like vending machines and gas stations would have a name on them, and it would be really exciting for people to try to find their name or their name of someone they know. And of course, if you saw your name on it, you'd have to buy it, right? Because how often do you find your name on something? So that was a really effective marketing campaign for them as well. So in conclusion, I want to talk about that quote on the first slide of my presentation. I want to see a lot of body bags. Coca-Cola is a very aggressive marketing company. That's why they have so much success. And that quote comes from their former North and South American marketing director. And in an interview for the book Salt, Sugar, Fat by Michael Moss, he was describing their approach to their competition with Pepsi, and he described it as a war. And there's a longer part of the quote where he's talking about how when you keep score in war, you do it by how many body bags you take off the field. And he said of basically like Pepsi losing market share to Coke, I want to see a lot of body bags. So that tells you just how aggressive they are as a company, and they clearly have been winning the war. They're way more successful than Pepsi around the world. But one thing I find interesting about that story is the conclusion is that that man kind of realized that they were going a little too hard at it, maybe preying on people in really, really poor parts of the world they shouldn't have. And so he resigned morally and like as a moral objection to it. And he now markets baby carrots for North American carrot distributors, which I think is a really cool ending to that story. So overall, you know, Coke knows that they are marketing a sugary product and they're pretty aggressive about it. But you still have to stand in awe of the power of this company that started the soft drink industry. It shaped our image of Christmas, and it has absolutely dominant brand recognition around the world. I want to end with another fact from Business Insider, which is that 94% of humans around the world recognize the Coca-Cola logo, and the phrase Coca-Cola is the second most expression in the entire world behind the phrase okay.